Okay, welcome everybody. This is a faith integration session that we call Informed Reflection, Faith Integration and the Use of Academic Resources. One of the things that we're trying to do in faith integration is help people unpack ways to apply this in the academic context in meaningful ways. And we recognize that drawing on the resources and the thinking of others in places like libraries and databases is an important part of our work. So today, this is our ambitious goal, what we want to accomplish, the goals. I want to revisit APU's definition of faith integration and make the connection to what we're doing in this particular workshop. I want to suggest to you 9 different ways that people can sort of organize their thinking about the use of resources, popular resources, scholarly resources, resources in faith, resources in our field, and so we'll make sense of that. Michelle is here from the Theological Libraries to talk to us about the Faith Integration LibGuides. And if you don't know about that, you will be in for a wonderful treat. Whenever Michelle or I talk about this, people always go away feeling very excited and energized about what's available to us right here at APU. If we have time, we'll talk about different ways people use academic resources in faith integration. Talk about some transdisciplines, disciplines that are available to us outside maybe your discipline that we can draw on. And if we have time, some misuses, some ways that sometimes people think it might be a good idea, but maybe not so much in the use of resources in our teaching and in our scholarship. Faith integration is something that is a skill that's developed. Over time, you figure out how to do it better, and these are some of the competencies that we're working with to understand that. And so we have a definitional competency. We think it's important people know what we're talking about and what we mean. A disciplinary competency. And the scholarly competency is what this workshop is interested in. Scholarship, of course, has to do with what we're producing in terms of publications. We're being scholarly in our faith integration work. But we also want to appreciate the scholarship of others and drawing on the scholarship of others. And so that's going to be the focus of our conversation over the next few minutes today. Okay? So let's see. You're going to see some books pictured here. There's some books on one of the handouts that you've got in front of you. The point is not to necessarily recommend all these, but to provide them as illustrations. You'd like to think that the faith integration guy or the theological librarian have read all these books that we talk about. Not so much, right? But yet we recognize they fit in categories that we can then draw on, and then it's your job in your work to look and to find out how they will be helpful to you. Okay? Now this is, I acknowledge, a workshop that's sort of like fire hose training. By the end, you will probably have a little bit of a headache. It will feel overwhelming. There will be way too much to sort of grasp. And so, but we only get a chance to be together now and then. And so we're going to pack a lot in. And then you feel free to follow up with myself or with Michelle. And we would be happy to tease these things out in more particular ways for you along the way. But there's going to be more than you can write down. So grab hold of the things that are valuable, the things that are going to make sense and be useful to you. And don't feel like you have to own it or have it all here right at the beginning. Okay? All right, so here's our definition of faith integration at APU. It's shifted just with a couple of words in the last couple of years. So if you haven't looked at this definition in a couple of years, I'll point out how it's changed. Our focus is going to be, as per the title of this workshop, this phrase, informed reflection. Faith integration is the informed reflection on and discovery of the relationships between. That's a new phrase that the Faith Integration Council added this last year. It doesn't change things fundamentally. I think it clarifies what we're trying to do. We're interested in bringing thoughtful reflection, informed insights to understand the relationships between the Christian faith and whatever it is you teach, the academic disciplines, professional programs, etc. And we're interested in doing that in light of the mission of APU to advance the work of God in the world. And so we're going to focus today on that first big idea. So you're probably familiar with this idea of reflection. I do reflection with my students. I want them to look inside and look at their life situation, look at their values, look at their commitments, the things that they say they believe, and to do some reflection on that and to go deep in their own attention to whether that is actually something they own or it's an inherited value or inherited perspective. Psychologists use the idea of reflection. Theologians are interested in people reflecting spiritually. This is an important idea. In informed reflection, we bring other people into the conversation with us. So it's not just something I do within myself, but I say, you know, there's other people who've thought about these things, and they can help me think more deeply about these things. This isn't an isolated activity. This is a community activity, and there's people who know more than I do, or they've thought more deeply about a particular issue. I'm going to invite them to be a part of that with me. Let me give you an example on this. So, keeping with reflection, a person looks in the mirror at home all by themselves, and they see something, and it's concerning to them, and, well, okay, that's a start. But what that person is wise to do is to invite informed, thoughtful consultants, experts to provide some additional input. These are people who know some things about perhaps skin or the issues that are involved there. And then that person's actions are going to be based on more than just their own best guess. Their own reflection will be based on the insights that others have provided for them as well. So that's the kind of thing we want to do in the academic context. Informed reflection as a part of the work of faith integration provides a way to support faith-based assertions with scholarly evidence. So there's a lot of things I believe that other people have taken more time than I have to study and to make sense of and to spell out and to articulate and to provide arguments for or explanations for. And so those are valuable people for us. Informed reflection as a part of faith integration can illustrate different Christian perspectives. So you have your Christian perspective. It's worthy. It's probably got some historic validity to it. Others have thought this way before you. But there's other Christian perspectives. And so informed reflection says, I'm going to ask who has thought in different ways about this thing, in different eras of time perhaps, from different theological or denominational perspectives, and they help bring further wisdom. Informed reflection can expand and deepen simple faith-based concepts and insights. So I've noticed that there's a commitment of many of us to bring Scripture into our classrooms, that becomes a worthy kind of thing as a part of the conversation. Informed reflection says, well, what have commentators of the Scripture and insightful theologians and perhaps ancient Christian thinkers done with that passage that makes it more than just this passage meant a lot to me and it's meaningful and I think it relates somehow to what I'm teaching here. Other people can give some depth to that and some further wisdom and perspective. Informed reflection can ground discipline-related ideals in Christian knowledge. So there's certain things that we believe in our discipline, but sometimes Christian people have thought about that, and they can say, you know what, this is more than just a practice in your discipline. This actually correlates with something that people have been thinking about from a faith perspective, and so we can draw on their insights as well. And it can link theological insights to the insights of observation. There might be some things that might be very obvious, might be very evident to people in field work or in experiential learning. They might notice them. But when we bring others into the conversation, it gives us support, a validity, a breadth of understanding to their observations. So these are just a few of the kinds of things that can happen there. So let me illustrate this in some different ways. Informed reflection, different from just reflecting, looks maybe like this. I'll give some examples from across different disciplines. Somebody might say, I recall when I was a practicing professional, I used to pray to start my day. This practice frequently gave me the strength to face difficult challenges. So a person maybe in nursing or teacher education might talk about the history they have in a particular area and how prayer and spiritual life was important to them. And our students need to hear this. That gives authenticity and depth and real personality to the work that we're doing. Do that. But informed reflection takes it to another level. As a practicing professional, I used to pray to start my day. This practice frequently gave me the strength to face difficult challenges. Since then, I have found that the literature of our profession suggests that professionals in our field who have developed a habit of spiritual practices are more likely to make wise decisions, experience resilience, and face difficulty with confidence. So now it's more than just I said it because I experienced it and you should believe it. I'm the teacher with authority and there it is. But there's actually a literature base that has validated the things that are of interest to me. This is particularly valuable when we're with non-Christians in some of our classrooms because if it's left as only my experience and anecdotally what I did, but it's not tied to academic thought in any way. Students can say, well, that's you, but that's not me, and that has nothing to do with what I'm here to learn. If we can bring thoughtful research, thoughtful insight into that, that helps them to appreciate what we're aiming to do here. Here's another example. I believe in the sovereignty of God, says the historian. That conviction leads me to believe that historic events are orchestrated by the hand of God. Well, a person who's a Christian and a historian probably knows that that's not the only way to think about the matter of history from a Christian perspective. So they might say, I believe in the sovereignty of God. That conviction challenges me when I think about historic events. Theologians such as Brown argue that God's sovereignty means that historic events are orchestrated by the hand of God. Other theologians, such as White, suggest the opposite. So now we're giving students a chance to see how different Christian folks have different theological perspectives on the work of history. And in an institution like this, it's a great opportunity to create conversation and awareness in our students. Somebody might say, Jesus modeled the healing power of touch. We too should touch those who are sick and hurting. So a person who's got experience in social work or nursing may have found that to be so and appreciates that as a part of how they want to provide instruction. Informed reflection says Jesus modeled the healing power of touch. Is there something about touch that goes beyond just his cultural practice and his identity as God the healer? Smith suggests that touch has healing impact. In her study of 515 sick men and women, she shows these kinds of things. There are many Bible verses about the poor, which should remind us that an economy that forgets the poor is unbiblical. Self-evident, right, Viv? This is clear. But let's invite students to go a little bit deeper. Let's take them to a text of Scripture that seeks to articulate this. But let's bring other thinkers into that who can help students to unpack it. There are many, many verses about the poor. Let's carefully study one passage, Isaiah 58, and see if it might have input for our study of the role of free market economies in developing countries. To help us, we'll draw on the commentaries written by Johnson, Thomas, and Roberts. So now we've got other theologians who've looked at passages that are concerned about an issue that you may be interested in, and they're helping broaden your thinking and broaden the conversation with the students. Music touches the soul, which can be seen by how people in church lift their hearts to God, right? So a person who's passionate about music and through observation has noticed the energy behind musical expression may notice that. It may be a very self-evident observation. But what if that person says, observation of people in church suggests that music touches the soul, but observation doesn't tell the whole story. We need to draw on the work of spiritual fathers and mothers of the ancient Christian past, Christian thought leaders from our own day, to get insight on the nature of the soul. Only then can we consider if music can touch the soul and in what way. So that's a very relevant theological issue, the nature of the soul. So those are some examples of how informed reflection can broaden our ability to do faith integration in a way that in the academic setting makes sense. So let's talk about faith integration then as an idea of the relationship between different ideas. Because in academics we put things in boxes, right? And so the people who study music, the people who study nursing, the people who study economics have things in their boxes, and the theologians tend to have things in their boxes. And what we're interested in is those places of intersection and dialogue and conversation. What we're looking for, in particular, when it comes to the research that we might do, is what I like to call that faith integration sweet spot. In other words, has somebody written this amazing article or the perfect book that gets at that area of intersection that I am most interested in? And there's a very good possibility that somebody has written a book or an article on that, but there's just as good a possibility that they haven't. And so we're going to look for those kinds of sources, and we're going to try to find them because they're going to cut to the chase in terms of helping us to make the connections. But there's a possibility that you might get to be the one who does the kind of integrative work. And Michelle, in just a minute, is going to give you some ways to find out quickly if those kinds of things are available. So some examples in the intersection here. I was doing a class with the leadership students that I'm with on systems thinking. And systems thinking, I got wondering to myself whether there was a connection related to faith that might help them appreciate systems thinking with some depth to it. We paid attention to the systems thinking theorists like Peter Senge and others. As I was preparing, and especially this year this came to me, I thought, you know what? Shalom as a manifestation of God's organization of a society where things are at peace with one another in the particular system, social system, the ecosystem in which they exist, is actually an illustration of systems thinking manifested in a healthy way. So I did some teaching on systems thinking. I put some reading material in front of my students on Shalom. I asked them to talk about the connections they made and how they understood leadership in light of that, and brilliant things emerged. So that was a fun example just this last year for me. Social justice, of course, in many of our areas of teaching is important. But this idea from Walter Brueggemann, a theologian, an Old Testament theologian, of the prophetic imagination can inform how we understand social justice with a faith-based orientation. Rather than just social justice as is commonly understood in many places, it brings a unique perspective from the Old Testament prophets. Literacy, people who are interested in students learning to read, well, we can say that it's not just learning to read, the grammar and the syntax and all of that, but it's learning to read for wisdom. How can we read with eyes of faith in light of a Christian perspective of wisdom so that when people are picking up those books, they can draw insight that will increase their wisdom? Practicing. So in many of our disciplines across APU programs, students are pursuing a practice, or they will be engaged in certain practices. Beautiful thing about the Christian tradition is that there's also a tradition of practices. There's certain things that down through time and across different faith traditions have become a kind of legacy that's been passed on, certain practices. Hospitality is a good example of that. The idea of testifying is another example of that. The idea of caring for the body is another example of that. These are practices that may have a kind of correlation with the kinds of practices we're preparing our students to do in their own work. And there could be a mutually informative opportunity that occurs when we look at one and the other in conversation. So there's a guy here at APU, and a part of his work is to design the sets for the theater. And he might be the kind of person who could say, you know, how can I get faith integration out of woodworking? And we're hammering nails and building sets for the plays. There is, in Christian tradition, it comes out of 1 Thessalonians, but others have kind of worked on this idea more fully, on the working with your hands. So the craftsmanship of the Shakers. The Shakers are an ancient Christian, or an American Christian tradition. The care for material things is a valuable thing in Christian faith and tradition. We can draw on these things and make sense of woodworking more than just knowing how to pound a nail in the right place. Exercise. So faculty members who are working with the body, and they want students to learn to be healthy in how they exercise and the discipline of their body. Well, maybe there's some insights in exercise that can have mutual contribution to spiritual exercise or spiritual discipline. So that while I might be interested in spiritual disciplines largely, if I'm an exercise professor, there might be a chance here to do something unique because of the natural connection that these ideas might have with each other. So these are some examples of the relational opportunities that we have in faith integration. Okay, let me provide for you a little taxonomy that's helped me to sort of visualize and then work with the different kinds of materials, because you are going to draw on all kinds of things, but sort of seeing where they might fit can be helpful in then making choices about what's most appropriate in my context. So I gave you a handout, looks kind of like this, and if you'll find the one that has the writing on it, on the back are some pictures of some books, and on the front is this with some writing on it. Let me just go through each of these areas for you, and as I go, be very personal yourself and think about, well, what am I drawing on? What am I using? What are the things in my classes that I'm finding useful? So let's talk about that first category where we see discipline-related material that's scholarly. So these are things that people in your field would say, clearly it's a part of our discipline. There's no question there. It's a part of the field of scholarship or performance or learning that we're committed to. And it's scholarly. Anybody in our world, our colleagues here at APU and in other places would say, yes, this is a scholarly resource. Then there's discipline-related things that might be on a more popular level. They might not have the same research depth. The audience that they're intended for might be more of a popular audience. It doesn't mean they're unworthy, but it means that their design and their organization is for a broader audience, an audience that may not have the scholarly or academic knowledge in your area that you may have. Then we've got this kind of crossover category. It's got a scholarly foundation, but it's written in a way that the more average audience might be able to access it. So Steve Wilkins in the School of Philosophy is somebody who's done a number of these kinds of things. Steve has a book called Bumper Sticker Ethics. It's InterVarsity Press. The title tells you it's probably designed for a popular audience. But Steve's no slouch, right? Steve's done his homework. Steve's thought deeply about ethics, and he's paid attention to the history of ethics and the different ethical theories. So it's got that foundation to it, but it's for a younger kind of audience. So how does that relate to us in faith integration? These are the kinds of things that are very valuable to us, but maybe not the place to stop. We might want to move. These are probably not going to be the most helpful things for us in faith integration. The discipline-related but popular things, and I'm going to give you some examples of that. These we're going to draw on a fair amount, but these are going to be those things that are like, is it scholarship? Is it scholarly? Because it's like, but I think it is because the person who wrote it is a thoughtful person. They have a good reputation in their thinking. And so I find myself using a lot of these kinds of things in my teaching. In my scholarship, I might end up more up here. And so you're going to pay attention to where things might be useful to you. Let's go over here. Faith-related and scholarly. These may be, if you're not in theology, outside of your area. So these might be a critical commentary or a theological textbook. That might be, not be your area, but you'll recognize those as perhaps offering something to your work. There's, again, just as in the discipline area, faith-related and popular books. A lot of these kinds of things. And some of it is very worthy, and some of it, it's devotional, it's encouraging, it's inspirational, and people are impacted in different ways by that. But it may not have as much contribution for us. It may, and I'm going to show you some examples of how it may. And then, of course, there's the crossover kinds of things. It's things that are based in a scholarly kind of understanding and foundation, but it's written and prepared for a popular audience. In the middle here are things that actually begin the integration work. These are the things that begin to get in that sweet spot, right? It's scholarly, clearly, and it takes an area I'm interested in, and it touches on it from a faith perspective. So I'm interested in food and gardens and agriculture. So when I come across somebody who's done some scholarly work on a theology of food that brings those things together, that's exciting for me because that touches areas that I'm interested in thinking about and doing further research on. There's going to be also that kind of thing, of course, at the more popular level. These books actually might get assigned to our undergraduates because it's the kind of thing that's accessible to them. For us, it may not be the place to stop, but it's certainly worthy in filling our own knowledge. This is the funnest, right? When right there at the middle, it's like readable, it's useful, it comes across in a meaningful way, and yet it's got that scholarly foundation to it. It integrates things. These things here become those places in the sweet spot. We want those things to exist. Many of them do. You're going to learn today how to find those things. But sometimes they don't, and you get to be the one to put things together. So I gave you an example from on the back from my area of leadership. You'll see here some examples of the kinds of things that I've drawn on or chosen to avoid in my work as a leadership professor and in my interest in faith integration. So at that top category, in the discipline-related, Here's a couple of things. One of them is Machiavelli's book, The Prince. So that fits in the scholarly category because you can't be a leadership scholar without knowing about and being able to make sense of and respond to Machiavelli's The Prince. Here, on the other hand, I forget the press that does the new psychology of leadership, very research-based. A psychologist, a professor like me says, clearly that's generated from a scholarly perspective. At the bottom are things that you would find at Barnes & Noble. They're not unvaluable. People read them and appreciate them, but there's not a research base to them. And so in a place like a university, we're careful about using those kinds of things because we're here to talk about how knowledge is developed from a thoughtful perspective. And these kinds of things, although being common sense, may not have the best place in our scholarship or our classroom. But there are some middle kinds of things. So the book Credibility by Kuznets and Posner talks about credibility as a part of good leadership. People want their leaders to be credible. They have done a lot of research. But it's written in a way that's very accessible. You would find this book at Barnes & Noble as well. So it crosses over in a way. On the other side, here's a book based on Thomas Aquinas' perspective on virtue. So again, like Machiavelli, we have an ancient Christian philosopher who's thought about something. I might be able to draw on that. Or I have a critical commentary on the book of Nehemiah. So I might be teaching about leadership and want to use Nehemiah as an example. Well, I could just do it in a light-hearted devotional way, or I can say, what do some of these people who've studied Nehemiah from a leadership perspective and from a biblical studies perspective, what do they have to say? Down at the bottom, I've got a biography of William Wilberforce, and it's inspirational. And I have invited my students to study William Wilberforce. I probably wouldn't assign this book in the class, but I might use it anecdotally to draw out some deeper understandings of Wilberforce for my students from a faith perspective and how he went about the task of leadership. David Benner writes a book called The Gift of Being Yourself. It's very thin, very accessible. I do assign this book in a class, but I probably wouldn't use it in my scholarship because it's designed at that popular level. In the middle, again, I gave the example of Steve's book, Bumper Sticker Ethics. That sort of bridges the gap. At the top, we have discipline-related. So here's books that are about leadership, but they intentionally connect faith. So they're already beginning to move in that integration direction. Erasmus, a contemporary of Machiavelli, writes a Christian Catholic perspective on political leadership. Faith in the Halls of Power, Michael Lindsay. This was his dissertation, and it got the Dissertation of the Year award at the International Leadership Association because it was very well researched. Oxford University Press took it up, a very worthy kind of connection there that brings faith and scholarship together, as does a book that studies the Corinthian church, this book from Andrew Clark, a theologian, a biblical scholar, who's looked at leadership in the Corinthian community and in the other New Testament churches. Down at the bottom, more popular, The Leadership Secrets of Billy Graham. In the Name of Jesus, Henry Nouwen. People often ask me about faith integration, the use of Henry Nouwen. I say, Henry Nouwen's great. If he's meant something to you, don't avoid him, but not alone. Let Henry Nouwen come into conversation with some of these other people as well. John Stott is a very insightful Christian biblical scholar, passed away a few years ago. I draw on John Stott. I love his thinking, his clear writing, but I wouldn't leave it alone, okay? So this is just, again, a way to illustrate for you the possibilities and to appreciate what you might draw on, not feeling locked into a particular category, but not being limited to certain places as well. Okay, so I gave you blanks so that when you go home, you can just play with this a little bit when you think about your the resources that you draw on for your work in faith integration. So let's move now to a conversation of where do we start. This is the most common question I get asked in faith integration. Okay, I get the idea. Now where do I start? And we're going to bring up Michelle from the Theological Libraries, and she's going to help us to get started in this.
All right, so my name is Michelle Spomer. I'm a librarian here. I'm in the Theology Library, so I got to combine my library degree with my theology degree, and I created an online guide that should help all of you find resources in your disciplines that have to do with faith integration, or at least give you a start. The guide is not comprehensive, and I would love to get more input. I would love to add things to this guide. So what I want to do today is just introduce you to what's in the guide so that you know how to use it. So they have this handout, right, Connie? Yes. Yeah. So you can keep this handout to just review the different areas. I've given you brief descriptions on each of the areas. So if we don't get to everything today, you can always take this back with you, or just explore the guide. It's kind of somewhat self-explanatory. All right, so I did want to show you how to get to all of our online guides from the library website. So once you're on the library website, if you scroll down and go to underneath the research help, to LibGuides Topical Help, go ahead and click on that. That's the portal page to all of the online guides that our librarians have created. If you scroll down to faith integration, there's just one under there right now, and go ahead and click on that. All right, so here is what the guide looks like. Each of the tabs that you see are different pages in the guide. Now, some of these pages actually have sub-pages, and we'll take a look at those. So right now, the introduction page is highlighted, so that's where we are right now. On this part of the guide, the important things to point out, if you have any questions, you can always email me, so my contact information is right here. And then the link off to the side that says Faith Integration in FES, I try to keep that updated. I think it's the most updated now, but that is actually the section of the faculty handbook that describes FES requirements for faith integration, just for your convenience. So this guide, I did create it mainly for faculty, but you can, as long as your students don't care about seeing stuff like that, you can always recommend this to your students if you find it helpful in your classes as well. All right, so scroll back up so we can see the tabs. Okay, so don't click on it yet, but just hover on General Resources. Okay, so General Resources, that General Resources is actually a page in itself, and then there's 4 subpages, so there's actually 5 pages there. So what I'm going to mention is the subpages. We're not going to look at those. I'll just tell you what's in them, and it's a little bit self-explanatory, but I did want to describe some of these things for those of you that might want more definition. So the first one contains recommended Bible dictionaries and introductions to the Bible. Usually the introductions focus on New Testament or Old Testament. They'll have a chapter on each book of the Bible and give you information on authorship and genre, overall themes, which might be really useful. Bible dictionaries, there's a lot of different kinds of those, but essentially a Bible dictionary, you can look up people, places, and things that you find in the Bible, and you'll get a nice article. Often you'll get a bibliography at the end of those articles for further research. So that's that section. Bible commentaries, a simple definition of that is Bible commentaries focus on one or more books of the Bible, and they're always in order by verse. So if you have a Bible verse and you want to know what various scholars say about that Bible verse, you can just look it up in order. It's very simple to use. And we have many, many, many different commentary sets. And so there are some recommended commentaries in that section, so you don't have to figure out which ones you want to use. I have some suggestions there. Concordances, simply big lists of all the words in a particular translation of the Bible. So, we have a concordance for King James Version, NIV, NRSV. So you can look up any word that you might think would be in that translation, and it will tell you all the verses where that word shows up. So that can be really, really useful. And then we have a few other word study resources, expository dictionary of Bible words or things like that. So that section in particular can help you hone in on particular words and do focus studies. And then the theology resources, you may or may not want to interact with that, but there is at least one section in there that lists about 3 or 4 books that just introduce you to what theology is, what Christian theology is. And if you're interested in that, I would spend some time in that section too. So go ahead and click on now, General Resources. So we're just clicking on the main tab. This section I created so that you can find resources that will just help you get a general overview of faith integration. So this is not focusing on particular disciplines. This is just helping you find resources that will describe the concept of faith integration, especially in higher education. So the on this page section, those are all links that take, it's actually a really large page. So those are just for your convenience to get to the various boxes. This top box, searches to get you started. These links, and you'll see the same box in the discipline pages as well, but these links all take you into the catalog and do searches for you. So you can find the books that APU has on in these various disciplines. But these are subjects that I pulled out that may have general resources for you in lots of different areas. How many of you have used Link Plus? What? Good. So Link Plus is another catalog that combines 60 libraries, 60 plus libraries. Most of those libraries are academic. There's a few public libraries and specialized libraries too. But Link Plus, the button that will take you into that catalog, those buttons are integrated in our catalog too. So why don't you, well, yes, I always forget what I put in these guides. So yes, you'll see when. So I'm going to wait to click on these when we get to the one of the subject pages. But when you click on these, that'll take you into our catalog. You can see what we have here at APU. But you will see that red Link Plus button off to the side, and when you click on that, it will take you into Link Plus at the same point you are in our catalog. So you get to see, hopefully, many, many, many more resources that other Link Plus libraries are able to provide for you. So Link Plus is free. We're saying, I think now 3 to 5 business days to get them. You can request them and pick them up at either Darling or Marshburn Library. So be sure you make use of Link Plus. All right, so the Faith Integration Collection APU, you'll see that there's actually a link there. The click here words are a link, and that link actually takes you to a relatively small, well, it takes you into the catalog. We have a relatively small print collection of faith integration resources if you want to kind of browse some things all at once, and it covers many different disciplines. But we have many more items that have to do with faith integration than are in that print collection. But if you're interested in coming to Stamps Library and just kind of browsing through a bunch of faith integration books, print books, you can do that. And you can browse that list actually just from here too. So, but we have many more that are not in that collection, and also ebooks that are not in the print collection. Off to the side, I've actually pulled out some of the books that we have at APU. In my guides, whenever you see a book cover and then the link next to it, now just hover over the book. Can you hover? Yeah. So you see that changes to Amazon. If you're interested in buying any of them or getting more information, you can click on the image and that'll take you into Amazon. The link off to the side, again, takes you into the catalog, and you can get more information about it there. But these are all books that we own here at APU. Not an exhaustive list, but again, just to get you started in the area of faith integration. We have some selected online journal articles. I would be happy to add more. If you give me more, I'll put them there. Scroll down a little bit. These are articles that are constantly updated. It's an RSS feed from the ATLA religion database. So I did a search in that database, and then the feed spits out articles that are related to that search, are results of that search. The big problem, though, with EBSCO databases is that no matter what you do in the database, the feed is always going to organize them by the most recent date, which is not always the most relevant. So I've actually given you instructions here, but you can actually go to the website and sort them by relevance. And often, because sometimes you look at these and think that really doesn't have a whole lot to do. But if you actually sort them by relevance, you'll have a lot more luck. Scroll down a little bit. A ton of internet resources. These are mainly borrowed and added to from the the website for Office of Faith Integration. So most of what's there is here, and I've added some more. And if you scroll down a little bit more, I added the denominational websites section. So many websites will have resolutions or position statements that tell you what that particular denomination thinks on a variety of issues. A lot of bioethical issues you can find in there, lots of different issues, political issues, that kind of thing. So that can be relevant. If you want to do a Google search, now this software actually lets me create Google Scholar boxes specifically, but when they upgraded to the new platform, those boxes don't work actually. So, but eventually you will see actually a Google Scholar box too while you're at it. But if you clicked on the submit button here, you would get a lot of different articles or websites, some PDF files, things like that have to do with faith and learning or faith integration. And then the last box is just more guides that might be helpful. How to do scripture research in APU databases, that can be helpful. That's another one that I created. There's a tutorial in there on how to use ATLA religion database to find articles on specific scripture passages. So there's a lot there. Okay, so let's go spend just a little bit of time. Actually, probably I'll just tell you what this is. Search strategies. So I have strategies for searching the internet as well as our databases and our catalogs, including M.L.I.S. And have any of you used WorldCat before? That's another step up. It's essentially another library catalog, but instead of being for one library or 60 plus libraries, it's for hundreds of libraries. So if you want to even go that extra mile, you can search WorldCat. There's a link in that search strategies for WorldCat. And you would use our interlibrary loan service to retrieve things from that. So that's different than M.L.I.S. And it's also free though. So you do have to kind of plan ahead a little more for that because those books could come from anywhere. So they might take a week to come, whatever. All right, so let's get to one of the subject pages so that you can see what each of these pages have. And they're similar setups. So we're going to just look at the art and design page. So again, we have the link that will show you what's in the print collection. I've pulled out, once again, books that have specifically to do with the discipline and faith or Christianity in some ways. And these are kind of my best guesses. So if you don't like what I put up there, I'm fine with that. Just tell me that you don't like that or offer me more suggestions. But again, I was trying to pull things out that we have here at APU. If you would like to see us purchase something, just let me know. And there is budget for faith integration materials. Not very much, but I'll do it. Again, this is a searches to get you started. So you can see that each of these links are subjects that have to do somehow with faith integration and art or art and design. So one of the most handy subheadings is this religious aspects, moral and ethical aspects, philosophical aspects. Sometimes you just get philosophy. But those subheadings can be as valuable as the actual main headings. But again, those take you right into the catalog. And I did just add this today. So these are sort of instructions for getting just ebooks. Now, your number of resources goes down quite a bit when you do this, but if you're at home and you want to see what we have as far as ebooks go, you can just follow these instructions. It's pretty basic. So let's take a look at this. Click on Christianity and Art. So you can see that takes you right into the catalog. So for Christianity and Art, we have 21 things, but you can see some of these have all these lovely subheadings. So you should comb through those because those can be really useful. And be sure you take note if there's a second or third page. There's only 15 of these, so there's no second page. Here's the Link Plus button. Go ahead and click on that. So there are 21 things. You see how many Link Plus has? 60. So you should always be checking Link Plus. Now, some of those are duplicate records, but there are other different resources there as well. All right, so go back and, oh yeah, scroll up to the top a little bit. So if you click on this View Entire Collection menu and go up to the ebooks and click on that and then click Search. So those numbers go down a lot, but those would be all the books that you could view online from wherever you are. All right, so go back to the guide. Almost done. Yeah. All right, scroll down a little bit. So I have given you RSS feeds again. Sometimes I've done searches in the ATLA religion database, but if you have a discipline-specific database like PsycInfo or CINAHL or something like that, I tried to find stuff first in the discipline-related databases, but if ATLA had more than the discipline-related one, that's what I put there. So again, these are articles that satisfy a particular search I did. To sort them by relevance again, go to the website and just choose relevance. Internet resources is the last box. I would love to flesh this out more. These are pretty much taken from what you listed, Office of Faith Integration. I tried to find some other websites, but didn't often have a lot of luck. But I would love to kind of flesh that out too. And it doesn't have to be just an organization website. If you find some great, helpful information on just in your area, I would be happy to add that here. And just for nobody's taken me up on this either, but this is such flexible software that I can actually add documents to this. So if you guys want to help each other out and post documents and don't mind everyone else seeing it, please PowerPoints, I could put those in there. It's really flexible software, so I would love to get more, more investment, more suggestions. But all right, so that's it for me.
I want to just quickly, you're going to see a lot of books here, so don't try to get the titles down. But overview for you, some of the ways that people use resources. Now, I have books in pictures because articles aren't pretty, right? But these could be represented by articles as well. So there are books out there that help us understand this endeavor. And at one level, as we sort of get started in understanding what this is, there's people who have tried to think about that. And so people like Mark Knoll, or this book, Models of Christian Higher Education, looks at how Lutherans and Presbyterians and Baptists and Catholics think about the task of Christian faith integration. So that's one way I've noticed and appreciated people make use of resources. William Hasker's article is sort of the place many of us start from a journal perspective. Another is to quickly and directly provide orientation to short, faith-based perspectives on individual disciplines. Each of these books is filled with chapters from across the disciplines. So these are books that people like me really like, because I can say to people like you, there's a chapter on music, there's a chapter on economics, there's a chapter on medicine, there's a chapter on social work. And so these are the kinds of books that experts in the field of whatever it is have brought together some Christian thinking. And I find these great places to start, again, because they have a bibliography, and I can begin to go further because of the start here. A third way is to open up faculty members' minds to the variety of ways Christians have thought about certain issues. So recently I've gotten to know the author of this book, Eric Johnson. He put together this book, 5 Views of Psychology and Christianity. He doesn't hold all those views, but he has helped us by bringing together the different leading thinkers from a Christian perspective on these views. And maybe you're a Christian psychologist who is trained in one view. Guess what? There's multiple views in terms of Christians and politics and providence and science, of course. And maybe in your area too. So sometimes books bring these together for us. Another version of this would be surveys or introductions or foundations. A survey of Christian hymnody, foundational issues in Christian education. or books that put together readings of. So I was sharing with some faculty from the College of Music and the Arts this book on theological aesthetics, which starts at the early church and moves through the medieval church and the Reformation church and the modern Christian community, how different people have thought about these different issues, introducing you to a brief reading that might then have further things that you could go get and unpack. Readings on Christian political thought or on work. These can be great books to assign to students too, because they expose students to broad perspectives. Or looking at how different Christian groups or individuals have made an effort to live and practice certain things. So that might be a dictionary of Christian history. Or looking at the issue of rhetoric from the perspective of the most ancient of Christian rhetoricians, St. Augustine. How did William Wilberforce carry out politics? These kinds of looks at individuals and historic assessments. To see how Christians have responded to secular thought and practices. So this book, Nurture That Is Christian, it's an edited book, a number of chapters, but the Christian authors have taken on different mainstream educators like Vygotsky or Dewey, and they've tried to unpack an understanding of them from a Christian perspective. So these, Steve Wilkins, look at, don't you love the title of Steve's book?
I just want to pick it up and look through it.
That's right. So he looks at Nietzsche and Aristotle and Marx and says, what can Christian people draw from those kinds of individuals? Michelle mentioned denominational position papers. So here's the Presbyterian Church USA. They've thought about global economic justice. They have a very thoughtful position paper that might get you thinking. The Lutheran Church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church, has similar things. So you see topics over there. These are, again, people in context who are interested in these issues in a social way and have done some good homework. To make ethical connections. So there's different ways to approach ethics, but ethics is important to us. I was talking to some people and they were saying, isn't ethics wherever you go, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian? Well, Christian people have thought about ethics in distinctly Christian sorts of ways. So drawing on their perspectives. Here's a book on healthcare ethics from a Christian perspective that has got some good work behind it. So then here's illustrations of where people begin to see connections. Somebody's interested in diversity. Well, Miroslav Volf is also interested in diversity, and he's interested in how Christians appreciate and understand otherness. So bringing things into conversation with each other from inside and outside Christian faith. Or the issue of addiction. Somebody might say, well, what does sin have to do with addiction, and how do those intersect? Or leadership and spirituality. So here's a book on spiritual leadership, not, as far as I know, written by Christian people. Well, here's a book on a history of spirituality. Well, how do they intersect with each other, and how do they speak to each other? Globalization and justice from a larger Christian perspective, certainly issues that can have opportunity for each other. Okay, so those are examples of that kind of thing. Then there's looking at dealing with the macro discipline. So you might be in a small area within your discipline where you focus, but disciplines are large families of ideas. So whether it's economics as a big idea, or business as a big idea, or performance, theater, or biology, or whatever. These are big idea kinds of books. Your area might be a small one within it, but gives you a sense of where you fit in the larger scheme of your area. Or maybe micro-disciplines. So somebody's interested in the smaller area of feminist theory, or cultural diversity. So David Smith at Calvin College is a German professor, but he's very interested in the smaller area of cultural diversity, not just foreign language as a large thing, but the cultural connections that Christians can have. Or if you're interested in animals, what is a faith-based perspective on animals? These are books that, when I see them, I call them bridge books in my mind, because it doesn't end there, but they take me somewhere. So a philosophy of music. Okay, so I want to see what a secular person is thinking about, the nature of what music is, and that's going to then take me further in terms of my interest in making a theology of music or a Christian perspective on music. Athletics and philosophy in the ancient world. Well, that's not a faith-based book, but philosophy and theology have some intersecting areas of interest, so that might take me further. This book on illness, I read the first handful of chapters on this. I'd like to finish this book, but this is by a philosopher who got sick, very sick, and used their knowledge of philosophy to try to make sense of their sickness. Well, I say, can we draw on that? Can we think as Christian thinkers, as people who are interested in theology and the Bible, on making sense of our whatever? This is a good example of that kind of thing. So lots of things like that. Books that link the task of preparing Christian students to serve the world. So our students are going to go out into the world. We want them to be difference makers. Well, I'd like them to learn to think like Leslie Newbigin, to understand that our culture is a missional opportunity and that we can bring the gospel in meaningful ways into our culture. I want them to understand the sense of vocation, that they don't just have a career and a job, but they're called. Gordon Smith in the middle can help with that. I mentioned Walter Brueggemann, helping to think about being people who see the world's problems in meaningful ways and make a difference. Worldview is another issue, and so these are some of the resources that deal with the issue of worldview, Christians thinking Christianly about the world. Pointing out to you, just as we wrap up here, 4 transdisciplines. You'll see the titles up there. I'll just put a few pictures up of Christian theology, Christian philosophy, biblical studies, and Christian history and tradition. These are areas that may not be your area, but they may be informative in your area. Now, I told you at the beginning, you'd probably feel overwhelmed. Faith integration is not becoming an expert in any one or all of these areas at all, but it's identifying meaningful ways to draw on them to enrich what you want to do, again, from an informed perspective, from a Christian faith perspective. And we need to, if we're not in these areas, become reasonably comfortable in accessing them. And Michelle's guides and other places in the library, our librarians as a faculty team are there to help us with that. Other colleagues can help us with that. But these are some of the areas you might want to consider. I'll just mention one, and Michelle alluded to this as well with the commentaries. This is a commentary series called the Word Biblical Commentary Series. This would be considered a critical commentary. Don't let that scare you. This is accessible. You're a smart person. You can read and understand these things. But it will take your understanding of a biblical passage that you might find relevant to your work. It will take your understanding deeper. And you will appreciate the time that you spend here. And if you want to invest, I didn't look how much it is, but there's all 58 volumes on CD-ROM. And you can have it right there on your computer. Meanwhile, we've got these things in our library, and I'm sure we have all the volumes now. I think this set has been completed. It hasn't been completed, right? So there's still somebody who's missed their due date. Yes. So but it is a wonderful series. There's others like them as well. The New International Critical Commentary series is another valuable one. But this is a good place to start if you're interested in engaging in commentaries. All right, wrapping up here with some misuses that I've noticed in my work in people assigning faith integration materials. The first is assigning the Bible. If you're a Bible teacher, assign the Bible. But if you're not, then let the Bible teachers do that, and you might bring it in on a frequent basis, but it may not be one of the course textbooks that you assign. I think some people think, I'm doing faith integration if I get the students to read the Bible. If it doesn't have anything to do with what you're there to teach, then maybe it's not the best option. Assigning a book that was meaningful to you personally or spiritually. So I've read a couple John Ortberg books, maybe you have, meaningful to me personally and spiritually. But if it has nothing to do with what we're here to learn in this particular class, it's probably not going to be the best choice. Assigning a relevant popular book without offering some depth. So Parker Palmer, people love Parker Palmer. He's a clear writer. He's written a thin little 90-page book. Well, you may choose to do that, but if it's not supplemented by something with some of that more, up in this category when we talked about earlier, that more scholarly perspective, then that's nice, but that doesn't necessarily do what we're trying to do here. Assigning a secular book that deals with a faith-based topic, but not working with it from a faith-based perspective. So you might assign Aristotle, thinking, oh, he's talking about ethics. Christians are interested in ethics, so read this book about ethics. But if you don't come at it in light of faith, then that might not be the best option. Here's a book on spirituality and college students, written by some researchers at UCLA. Well, just because it has the word spirit in it doesn't mean that it's going to be ideal. It could be, but maybe not. And then a book as clearly helpful as the Bible and ethics, but if it's just assigned without students making the connections and you helping them to make those connections, then that may not be best either. So just making the connections is important. All right, let's close with this, my favorite Peanuts cartoon. You may have seen this before. I love this one. This is a faith integration cartoon, and it's meant to encourage you, okay? So when you see it, feel encouraged, right? I'll give you that particular punchline at the end. Aren't the clouds beautiful? They look like big balls of cotton, says Lucy. I could just lie here all day and watch them drift by. If you use your imagination, says Lucy, you can see lots of things in the cloud formations. What do you think you see, Linus? Well, he says, those clouds up there look like the map of the British Honduras on the Caribbean. That cloud up there looks a little like the profile of Thomas Eakins, the famous painter and sculptor. And that group of clouds over there gives me the impression of the stoning of Stephen. I can see the Apostle Paul standing there to one side. Uh-huh, that's very good. What do you see in the clouds, Charlie Brown? Well, I was going to say I saw a horsey and a ducky, but I changed my mind. You know, so faith integrate, what do you see? What are you beginning to see? It's okay if it's horsey and a ducky to start because we're all growing in our ability to do this. And some people have been at this longer than others. They see things more clearly, and that's fine. But we're beginning, and we're moving in a direction where we can get these kinds of perspectives. Informed reflection is a big part of that. Okay? So thanks for being here today. Appreciate your time with Michelle and I, and any further help that we can provide, we certainly remain